All right. Hello, everyone. A very happy new year to all of you, and welcome to today's Impact series. We're going to be talking about everything CX in 2026 and how do you actually move from insights to meaningful results. I am Sneha. I am the host of the Impact series. And for those of you that are new in the audience, I lead the business value and analytics team here at Observe.AI. I personally am very excited to have this conversation today because it's part of what I do on the daily with my customers. So really looking forward to unpacking some of that information with all of you. And I'm thrilled to be joined by my co-host today, Chrissy, who joins us from the product marketing team. Chrissy, I'm going to pass it over to you for a quick intro.
Sure. All right. Thank you, Sneha. I am so happy to be here. It's my first Impact series with Observe. A little bit about me. I've been in the CX space almost 25 years at this point. First half of my career, I worked on the contact center side, on the BPO side in operations, leading quality and compliance. And then I've been on the technology side for about 14 years now, leading both product marketing and product management teams throughout the contact center space. So really thrilled to be here and dig into this topic with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chrissy. I feel like every time I talk to you and just like rehear your experience in this space, I'm always so impressed. So I'm really excited to see, your take on all the different topics that we're going to be covering today.
I
But
feel
for
the
the,
same way about you.
you're very kind. Thank you. For the audience, some general housekeeping items. This session is being recorded. Submit any questions that you have in the Q&A section at any time. We will try our best to answer as many as we can, and the recording and follow-up resources will be sent out to you post the webinar. Okay, let's dive right into it. So I think on the topic of, how do we start looking at customer experience in 2026? Um, we used to have this problem in the past about lack of data, lack of insights, right? Now, with so many different AI solutions and, vendors popping up in this space, I don't think that's so much of a problem anymore. I think the problem is the opposite. Now you have customer experience and quality leaders telling you that, hey, I have so much data, I have so many dashboards, and I have more insights than I had ever before. Yet I'm not able to see any meaningful results. I'm not able to explain any performance gaps. So if everybody's talking about investing more in real time, people are talking about investing more in, conversational intelligence and analytics. Why are we still seeing so much disconnect between what it takes to get that impact from all these insights?
I think it's because most of the time people are not taking the time needed to really take a step back and think about like, what am I trying to do? What problem am I trying to solve? People are very busy trying to figure out how to get access to all the data, but they're not sure what to do with it. It's frankly, it's very overwhelming when we present all that data to employees at every level, whether you're an agent or manager, especially when there's no clear action to take or outcome that we're trying to achieve. And I think that's where insight to impact really dies. And we need to have that intuitive closed loop workflow that makes this process of change management easier. One of the questions that I feel like we keep hearing is if we know so much, why aren't outcomes improving faster?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. And I'm trying to streamline my thoughts here. So apologies, like, if I'm all over the place, but the way I think about it, it really boils down to three things, right? One is behavioral lag, the other one is metric fog, and the last one is accountability gap. Now you might tell me what is this gibberish, right? So let me break it down. What I'm essentially trying to say is we may have mastered the intelligence part, like how do you discover the insights. What we need to master now is how do you influence the rest of the organization with the intelligence that you've discovered, right? So what's happening today is you have all these quality and CX teams which are still treating CX measurement very traditionally. They are looking at point in time metrics, they're looking at static QA programs, single moment analysis, and then the expectation is to see entirely different results, right? That's not going to happen. So, what we need to do is today we're measuring agents if they're following a script, if they're adhering to specific compliance requirements, and we're not seeing if they've actually solved the customer's intent, right? So we need to move from QA as a point solution to looking at QA as a means to an end. And I talk about this a lot because when I say means to an end, your end outcome is to drive better customer experience. Your QA is going to help you achieve that end outcome. And for you to do that, you really need to kill measuring QA as a binary scorecard, right? Like whether somebody greeted the customer correctly, whether the call was, closed properly. Instead of a binary scorecard, there's a lot more beyond just compliance behaviors. There's a lot more, other competencies that you need to measure as part of QA. So that's one. The second piece that I think about is all these insights that you have, every insight needs to be tied to a workflow owner. So for every piece of intelligence you discover, you need to have one-to-one ratio of insight to action, right? Because we have abundance of insights, but if you don't have action items associated with those, all these insights are essentially stale. And so an example would be if we see a spike in a specific type of, conversation driver, and that could be something like billing confusion. That should not just be residing in a dashboard or in a slide deck when you're presenting to your customers. It needs to automatically trigger an action item or a workflow to the responsible stakeholder. Now, this could be triggering a workflow to, the product owners to make sure that they are solving for this within the product. It could trigger workflows to the training teams to update the knowledge base, right? So you need to have that insight to action mapping. And then the last part really is how do we close the loop? And you mentioned about this, right? So uh, everybody needs to take accountability for driving these behavior changes. And what's happening today is most companies, they are conducting one or two coaching sessions, maybe once a month. And that's also based on a very small sample set of interactions. So you need to shift your approach from that generic coaching to more micro coaching loops. And when I say micro coaching loops, it's more all these insights that you have in the dashboards. You need to leverage AI to automate these things at scale, right? So AI can now be leveraged for giving you very personal coaching notes. It doesn't just have to be something as easy as, oh, like, you did not open the call correctly or you did not close the call correctly. When I say personalized and tailored coaching notes, it's more, I've looked at 25 interactions or 30 interactions of yours, which did not have, like, the most optimal outcome. These are all the different things that you could have done better, right? Maybe you could have answered the customer's questions better. Maybe, you could have identified the knowledge resources for handling an objection better. So whatever that tailored coaching is, so you can start driving more self-awareness type of coaching for agents. So when we focus on these three things, I think that's when you can start turning insight to impact.
That's a lot of great points that you had there, Sneha. And I think there's also enormous momentum around experience intelligence across the industry, but I think it's also fueling some frustration as well. Leaders are under pressure to deliver results quickly, especially through real-time insights. But the challenge is that real-time alone rarely drives faster incomes. It only captures a moment of the interaction and not the full experience. What's missing is everything that happens before a customer reaches out and everything that follows after that conversation ends, which, that's an awful lot of the experience itself. So without that broader context, insights remain fragmented and action often stalls. And that's why the industry has really reached an inflection point. And the traditional definitions of agent performance, quality, customer experience, they can't keep pace with today's expectations or to deliver the outcomes at the speed the leaders need. So let's start with the foundation of all of this. Before teams can add more tools or dashboards or real-time alerts, the first question they really need to answer is what problem are we actually trying to solve in CX?
Yeah. So, and I think this was, for the audience here too, we've had a bunch of webinars in the past, and this seems to be like a recurring theme with most of the customers and prospects we engage, and that's you need to redefine your problem, right? And when I say problem, this is like what pain points are you trying to address with whatever AI solution you're trying to pick. And especially in the contact center space, I think we see most CX and quality initiatives falling into one of these four pillars. And this is broad, but it should ideally cover the KPIs, right? So one, and this is the end goal, you want to improve customer experience. Then the other thing that we keep hearing about is I want to drive consistency in agent performance. We also hear about, operational efficiency. How can I save cost? How can I reduce cost by maybe shortening the handle time, maybe by improving my first contact resolution? So operational efficiency is a big piece to it. And then the last piece is how do I reduce risks, associated with non-compliance, because that could lead into legal fines. And so you will notice that these buckets, they do overlap, right? And the trap that we're seeing today is we're trying to do all of these four things on day one. And if you try to optimize for efficiency and experience without a clear strategy, you are going to fail. So what you're going to end up doing is you're going to frustrate your agents, you're going to confuse your customers. So what I recommend is pick one lead domino. Everything else will naturally flow. And that lead domino is usually starting with, driving consistency in agent performance. And with that, your operational efficiency, driving better CX, all of that is going to flow naturally. And so the problem, like I mentioned, isn't having multiple metrics or multiple goals, right? The problem is having multiple unlinked goals. And when goals, they are siloed, your execution becomes very fragmented. So when they are unified into one single metric, then you're not multitasking. You're actually pursuing a single high definition target.
And that's really why clarity beats complexity every time. When a team aligns around a single shared definition of success, decisions just get easier from what tools to deploy to how agents are coached day to day. And that CX index really gives teams that alignment. It turns strategy into something operational. So every improvement compounds instead of competing. When everyone's pulling towards that same target, progress stops being incremental and starts being intentional. So Sneha, when teams aim to improve CSAT, lower costs, coach agents better, reduce risk immediately, what happens to the focus and the execution?
Great question. So as I mentioned, right, when you view these metrics in isolation, your metrics are going to start fighting against each other. So focus usually evaporates and dilutes because what you're now asking is you're asking your supervisors to turn into data scientists overnight. So you are bombarding them with 4 or 5 different dashboards where they need to, hunt for insights or, even spend 80% of their time identifying what the problem is in agent performance. And then they're spending 20% of the time trying to fix it when it needs to be the other way around, right? So the way I think about it, the solution is you need to provide automated correlations, right? You need to, instead of just showing the data, you need to deliver the why behind those results. Like, let's take handle time as an example. You don't just want to showcase trends in, oh, my handle time moved up or moved down by so many percentage points over so many weeks. What you really want to show them is, hey, your handle time went down or went up because your agent was lacking in providing, right resolution for a specific type of call. Um, and traditionally, you know, a lot of organizations, CX measurement has revolved around CSAT survey scores, NPS results, it's QA scores, right? These metrics matter. And again, this is a conversation I've had with so many different customers where I keep pitching to move beyond CSAT, QA, and these NPS results, but I've realized that these scores are here to stay. They're not going anywhere. They matter, but the thing is, they don't explain the why behind the customer's outcomes, right? So, like, let's take CSAT, for example. When you send out these survey results, only 6 or 8% of the population actually responds to it. You can't really have CSAT as your true North Star metric because it'll tell you how somebody felt, but it's not going to tell you why they felt a certain way. Similarly with, your QA score. A QA score can tell you whether an agent, was compliant, did they follow a predefined checklist. It's not necessarily going to tell you if they were able to resolve the actual intent of the customer, right? So neither of these scorecards or scoring metrics are telling you what's happening across the entire interaction.
And, I think that's exactly why high-performing organizations are really moving away from the point-in-time metrics and thinking about more of a CX index mindset. So instead of asking, how did this interaction score? They're asking, what is the customer actually experiencing over time? And that shift requires looking at patterns across multiple interactions, not just a single call or a chat. And a customer's perception isn't shaped by one moment either, right? It's shaped by the accumulation of experiences across their entire journey. So it also means prioritizing leading indicators of CSAT rather relying on the lagging signals that are often looked at. So by the time the CSAT score drops, the experience has already failed. And leaders really want to understand the signals that predict dissatisfaction before it shows up in a survey. And critically, organizations are paying attention to experience signals that are never predefined on the QA forms. Things like customer effort. We hear customer effort score a lot. Confusion, trust breakdowns, repeated friction, as to what their experience is like when they're dealing with the company. And their traditional scorecards just simply don't capture that. And this is why the industry is shifting towards predictive CSAT and experience intelligence. The goal is no longer to report what happened, but to anticipate outcomes and intervene early before customers churn or escalate or disengage altogether. If customer experience can't be understood through a single metric or a single moment, then measurement has to evolve too. And a CX index brings those signals together contextually, behaviorally, emotionally, and really reflects the true experience to drive the outcome at speed. Sneha, I'd love to hear more about your perception or your perspective on, what you can share from our customers of what they're doing today and what your team is doing, because I know the CX index is something that comes up a lot within your team.
Yeah. And you captured this, right? So as our needs are evolving, our measurement also has to evolve. And I talked about this briefly where, when you're chasing multiple metrics at once and they're unlinked goals, then the metrics are going to fight each other. So the solution is to transition from, chasing metrics in isolation to one composite metric. And, at Observe, we like to call that the customer experience index, right? What with AI, what you can do now is you can weigh all these different variables or different attributes in a conversation into one single score. You can look at agent sentiment, you can look at customer sentiment, you can look at, how long it takes for them to handle the call. You can take a look at the resolution outcome, their compliance behaviors. Combine all of these, metrics into one single score. And what this is going to do is now you're going to be able to reward a longer call with a higher satisfaction and higher compliance compared to a shorter call with more frustration, right? You essentially want to compare apples to apples, which traditionally has naturally happened with just one QA scorecard. And some of our, I would say some of the most successful customers that we have, they have taken that leap of faith in moving beyond that CSAT survey. That CSAT survey exists. That NPS score is coming in. Those QA scores, they are also part of the agent performance management, but they are also looking at this, CX index score. And what that's helping them do is it's essentially eliminating the amount of time they spend on hunting for insights, right? And I talked about this in the past where metrics are fighting against each other. One great example of that is a lot of our customers, they come to us with, hey, we, for the next 30, 60, 90 days, like our goal is to reduce our handle time. And then once that has been achieved, then the next quarter or the next 6 months is spent on, oh, let's improve CSAT. So what's going to happen is when you say for the first quarter, my goal is to reduce handle time, you're essentially pushing your agents to compromise on the quality of the experience, right? They're going to try to like get through these conversations faster. So your CSAT is going to take a hit there. And then once, you say, oh, now I want to focus on CSAT, then you realize that, hey, I would rather spend that extra time resolving the customer's issue versus, just uh, trying to keep the call short. So you always need to look at handle time, CSAT, all of these metrics together because that's really what's going to be sustainable in the long term for your business. And what we've also started to do with my team is we've moved away from managing, 15 different KPIs at once to a single, high fidelity outcome. So what we've implemented is something called automated performance queue. And what that's going to do is instead of your supervisor randomly picking calls, our system is now pushing like, the bottom 5%, 10% of these calls based on that CX index, right? To the dashboards almost every day, every morning. And we've eliminated the search phase, and 100% of the time is now spent on high value coaching. Having talked about, moving beyond CSAT, NPS, etc., I do think, the customer experience index, it is the new normal. And the way I see it, it will become the new normal for 2026 because, like I said, you're not going to spend, um, contradictory efforts in solving for different KPIs. You're just going to get this one single score, which is essentially helping you identify all the hotspots, friction points in your business. Talking about the CX index, I think it leads me into another topic, right? Let's talk a little bit about real time, how that comes into play in this, because I do feel like it's brought up in every single conversation these days. You have real time coaching, you have real time alerts, and they have a lot of value, right? Because you want to help the agents in the moment versus trying to solve for something post interaction or post call. You want to reduce the mistakes. You want to make sure that that performance becomes more consistent, or any compliance needs that you have, you're able to prompt them within the call in real time to solve for those. So real time is, only the way I think about it, while real time has really high value, I do think it's only one part of the CX puzzle. What's your opinion about it?
I'm so glad you brought up real time because I do think it's there's this myth of real time means it's better, right? If it's happening in the moment. And real time analysis has become a priority for many teams, and for good reason. It promises speed, it promises visibility, the ability to act in the moment. But when organizations rely exclusively on real time, they unintentionally create blind spots. And real time only tells you what's happening right now. It doesn't tell you what happened earlier in the customer journey. So, what the customer already tried, how many times they've contacted you, what friction brought them here in the first place. You don't have any of that insight when you're just looking at real time. Without that context, agents and leaders are reacting to symptoms, not the root causes. It also hides repeat contact patterns. A single interaction might look fine in isolation, but when you take a step back, you often see the same customer reaching out again and again for the same issue. Real-time analysis treats each interaction as new instead of recognizing experience breakdowns that span multiple touch points. Just as importantly, real-time can explain downstreaming outcomes. You don't know whether the issue was actually resolved, whether the customer churned, whether they escalated, or they just silently disengaged after the interaction ended. Those outcomes define the experience, but they happen after the moment has passed. And finally, real time misses the trends that only emerge over time. So experience patterns, systemic friction. Early warning signals don't surface in a single interaction. They appear only when interactions are connected, compared, and analyzed continuously. The challenges that many are connected compare, I'm sorry, the challenges that are we're looking at either real time or post interaction. And typically platforms are analyzing one or the other, and they treat them as that as complete coverage. But the experience isn't static and it isn't one dimensional. So when you analyze it only once, you've inevitably missed critical information. So to truly understand the experience, the analysis has to be continuous. It has to be contextual. It has to be connected across the entire journey, not just fast.
Yeah.
Sneha, I was going to say, do you want to talk a little bit about what Observe is doing in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd observe, like, we intentionally analyze these conversations more than once. And it's not because, we have to, because full visibility demands it, right? So you have real time, which is going to show you what's happening now. But that post interaction and longitudinal analysis is going to show you why it's happening. It's going to give you insights on whether this is, recurring, and it's going to tell you, hey, historically this is what your data indicates, these are your chances of preventing it. And so I do think, like, looking at real time and post call simultaneously, like analyzing in the moment and then analyzing post interaction, are extremely important to then make a more informed decision making.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good segue into this next topic. I think it's pretty clear vendors have mastered surfacing the data. We don't have an insights problem. But this is where CX really breaks down. I think we have an execution problem. Teams know what isn't working, but insights rarely turn into action at scale. So, Sneha, in your experience, what are some of the solutions that are helping customers with that execution piece?
So I did cover a little bit about, the execution gap. That was, the behavioral lag and, the moving from general coaching to micro coaching loops. The other piece that I think I may have missed is the quality. There's where you have quality automation and then you have hybrid quality automation, right? And hybrid QA becomes critical as one of the strategies for driving that, lowering that execution gap. So traditional QA, it is limited to what humans can listen to and what's on a form. You have automated QA, which is going to expand that coverage. It's going to give you 100% visibility. So you can make again, an informed decision. Hybrid QA is going to ensure trust. It's going to ensure accuracy and action. So with hybrid QA, what teams can start doing now is you can surface, moments in your conversation which weren't predefined. You can identify emerging, customer experience issues early on, and you can actually repurpose the human reviewer's time into something that adds more value, right? So one of the biggest things that we talk about when it comes to like automating QA or hybrid QA is, see, if you take a look at all the questions on your quality form, very rarely do those questions actually map to an end outcome. It's like I said, it's usually tracking static compliance behaviors. And so now when I have auto QA, which is, giving you that 100% coverage across all interactions, and then your hybrid QA model where your quality analysts, your supervisors can focus on the more subjective nuances of the conversation. And what they can do is they can spend more of their time coaching. High value coaching, like I mentioned, is something that everybody in the industry needs to move towards. And hybrid QA almost powers that. It's a win-win in both situations because you're getting scale, but you're also getting more strategic insight.
Very true. Yeah, and I think, it's an interesting, I think some businesses too, they really like the hybrid QA approach because it does allow you to change the role of the evaluator a bit more. They become more of that coach. They also become more strategic in what they're looking for and what to score and, how to move that feedback forward. So I think the hybrid QA approach is definitely something that seems to come up more and more versus going into the fully automated approach as well to get that full coverage. But I want to talk a little bit around agent scoring. I think this is something that recently came up when I was talking to a peer in the industry. But we were talking about agent scoring and the transition to agent performance itself. And I think one does not equal the other, right? Agent performance is not agent scoring. It's well beyond that. And it's really looking across the full journey. So traditional QA evaluates that single interaction against a predefined checklist, right? Did the agent say the right words? Did they follow the script? But that doesn't tell you where the agent consistently struggled over time. When you look across the entire journey, patterns emerge where the agent faced repeat customer confusion, where issues surfaced after being marked resolved, where effort accumulates across multiple contexts. Those signals don't necessarily show up in a single QA score. And that's why the high performing teams are really redefining what agent performance means. It's no longer about how an agent scored in one moment. It's about how effectively they drive outcomes across interactions, customers, and time. And that requires going beyond the traditional QA to understand performance in context and not isolation.
Yeah, that's spot on. Traditionally, QA scoring has been binary. It's did they say something, or did they not? It's a yes no scorecard, right? Or sometimes it's not applicable. So you can pass the scorecard, but you can fail the customer.
Mhm.
So that's why I mentioned this earlier that we need to move away from that binary scorecard. Maybe like saying killing the binary scorecard might end up becoming a little too controversial, but yeah, definitely move away from the traditional binary scorecard. Most agent errors, and this is something that I've seen across after doing like analysis across hundreds of customers, a lot of these agent errors that show up in the data, they're actually process errors, right? Now, when you talk about performance understanding instead of simple, agent scoring, what that's going to do is it's going to start helping unlock uh, the performance gaps, the delta across teams and not just individuals. Like, let's take an example. If, say, 40% of your agents, they are failing or missing a step on compliance, it's not necessarily an agent issue, an agent performance issue, right? It might be that you have a training or a system friction problem. And the ability to differentiate whether this is an agent performance issue versus it's, a process or a product or a policy gap, that becomes clearer only when you move away from that binary agent scoring and start looking at things more contextually. And I feel as we move ahead in 2026, agents, they need to be a partner in the data, not a victim of it, right? We need to start replacing these monthly business reviews or quarterly business reviews with live growth maps. What I mean by that is because you're looking at a holistic score now, like the CX index, for 100% of the eligible interactions, the agents can see their own performance. They can see their own trends in real time. They can start applying, whatever feedback is given to them um, in real time, right? And this moves the conversation away from, hey, why did you get an 80 on this one call, to your CX index has improved by 12 percentage points this month. What are you doing differently? Right? You you need to look at, what is it that your top performers are doing differently? How can you leverage those behaviors across the rest of the organization and close that gap? And that's what agent performance understanding truly unlocks. So now what ends up happening is you're building this culture of, self-directed improvement. When agents start understanding their own behavior impacts their own holistic score, they don't need to be policed, right? And they become advocates for the customer. And another thing that is super important when it comes to moving away from this agent scoring to performance understanding is, see, at the end of the day, we as customers, we're all very demanding. And at the agents helping drive that customer experience are also humans. One of the biggest problems in, this space is attrition. There is extremely high attrition in contact centers. And one potential reason why attrition is high is because there is lack of right data or evidence to incentivize these agents to perform better. And a lot of times the agents feel like they've not been graded fairly. There could have been bias. If you're just sampling, 2% or 3% of the interactions that I take, and based on that, my bonuses are dependent based on that. One, that is definitely unfair. Even when you do have automated QA, it's also unfair to just score them on, static compliance behaviors. Because like I said, if you have an agent which is being policed to, oh, you need to reduce handle time, then that agent, because their bonus is dependent on it, is going to try everything in their power to rush the customer. But if you truly want to drive better customer experience, you need to look at what else did the agent do? What did they do to go above and beyond to drive that customer experience? And if that means it's a higher handle time, it's okay, because ultimately you want to optimize for the best outcome for the conversation, right? And you need to treat agents with as much importance as you treat your customers. And so when you take a look at this hybrid quality model, the CX index, moving to micro coaching loops, automating, like, all these different ways to consume insights, you're essentially telling that, hey, we're going to move to a fairer performance grading for you. And that's automatically going to incentivize them to want to do better, right? And that piece is like organizations that are able to unlock and treat their agents with as much importance as they treat their customers. I think they're the ones that are going to win in driving that unparalleled customer experience. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just add that two things I'll add. I think it's so important that to take a step back to understand what does good customer experience look like. Like you mentioned, AHT, that's probably my favorite topic to debate with my friends in this space. Does AHT matter? Because does a faster call really mean a better experience? But, so really making sure that you're measuring agents on metrics that are meaningful. But the second point that I wanted to also bring up is, my experience in the contact center, agents want to be successful, and if you give them the tools, the visibility, the direction, they will do what they need to do to be successful and be courteous to your customers and keep the customers coming back for more. So it all starts at that agent performance front and making sure that they have what they need to feel like you're supporting them to the the greatest extent. So, but I just wanted to add that in before we wrapped up a bit.
No, you're spot on. Yeah. And I know we talked about like so many different topics in today's conversation. I do want to leave, the audience with some practical takeaways. I think the very first thing is don't treat real time as the entire CX strategy. It's a piece of the puzzle, it's an input, it's not an answer. The other piece is you need to move beyond predefined QA forms, beyond, CSAT surveys and NPS results as your true North Star for customer experience. You need to look at a combination of these metrics, like the customer experience index score, which is going to help you eliminate all that, search effort. The third one is, use hybrid QA to balance automation with trust and accuracy. And the last one, like I talked about, is keep your agents at, the center of priority as much as you do your customer. And then the execution piece, the one-to-one, like every insight that's discovered needs to have a closed loop workflow. Unless you have that, you're going to keep complaining about the issue of, hey, I have so much data, I'm still not able to drive meaningful result. For you to drive it, there needs to be change management. It is mandatory at this point in time, right? So those are some of the things that, I that's my recap of everything that we discussed. Chrissy, want to give you a chance to see if you have anything I might have missed, anything else you want to add for the audience?
No, I think that really they're the biggest things that would be good for everyone to take away. And as well as I guess we can add the visibility piece of just understanding what is the right things to make visible to drive actual outcomes, and help your agents be successful.
Yeah, yeah. The way I say it, and I train all my customers to do this, map every single thing that you have, every question on your QA form, any automation that you're setting in place, map everything to an outcome. Because if you don't, then you're not going to get anywhere, right? So you need to start thinking about what's the long-term sustainability and revenue generation for the business versus, oh, I need to, like, cut costs in the next 30 or 60 days. So
Mhm.
moving away from that cost reduction to revenue generation mindset, I think that will automatically unlock everybody thinking about customer experience a certain way, and a lot of the things that we just discussed.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chrissy, thank you so much for taking the time to join this session today and provide your insights. This, I think, for me, this was exactly the kind of session I wanted to have about how to start thinking about customer experience in 2026. What are some of the things that you can start following in your organizations today? If you already have a vendor that's helping you with this, or if not, what should you be looking at? When it comes to vendor selection, a vendor who's able to do all of this for you, right? To everyone in the audience who's joined us today, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. We will be sharing the recording, and make sure to join us for our February Impact series. And that's going to happen on Feb 19, and that's going to be a Thursday. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.